Hey guys, this is a plea for Andy, and we're going to discuss metal.
This is the Discuss Metal podcast with Andy Dozer Atkins of A Plea for Purging. Hosted by Dan Terry and Joseph Wren. Presented by discussmetal.com.
Heck yeah, dude. That's the one and only.
Well, man, I'm glad you're here tonight. Now, are you also on lockdown?
Yeah, I am. I currently work in staging and productions. So live music events, right? That's what we do. We make custom staging gear and rent it and sell it out to, anybody from like Taylor Swift and Zach Brown Band to, anybody you could think of. So since all of that is shut down for the foreseeable future, our whole industry is just uprooted, and a ton of companies in our industry closed down. But we've been lucky enough that hasn't happened yet. But I haven't worked today. I actually went into the shop for the first time in a month, and worked a few hours just doing some stuff that needed to get done, and slowly going to start moving back into being able to go in a little bit here and there. But for the most part, we don't have any business lined up for the foreseeable future, which is kind of a bummer because it might seriously affect me pretty hard before it's over with. I've already taken like a pay cut and stuff, but long-winded answer to your question. Yeah, I'm working kind of.
Yeah, that seems to be most, if you're not trapped in your house, you're pretty much like, dude, I've been pulled over a couple times just for driving to work in Missouri, and they just put us on lockdown a little bit later than they probably should have. But yeah, I've been driving to work, and like Kyle will pull me over and be like, "Where are you going?" And I'll be like, "To work." And he's like, "Where's that?" And I got to show him like a note saying it's okay for me to go to work.
Yeah, we have those
yeah,
too.
It's just been wild. But one of the reasons we wanted to have you on too is just to get, there's been a lot of activity, especially from you lately on socials. You've been doing like some live stuff and like videos and all that stuff. And either I just haven't been following you for the past however many years, but it seems like there's been an uptick in content. Is that just because you've had time to do it?
Yeah, I've been active on like my Instagram more than anything, like over the past, 7 or 8 years. But just recently started paying a little bit more attention to Facebook and Twitter again. But ever since the band's been over, I've just been focused on like, real adult stuff, working a job, having a career, all that. But I really enjoy, one, making people laugh. I hope that people think I'm funny, or at least if they're not laughing with me, I'm cool with them laughing at me, kind of thing. But I miss that, and I miss like these kind of interactions. We don't know each other, and we're like sitting here talking to each other from other, you're in different states and stuff, and I just miss that. Like, I miss being on the road and meeting new people and having some sort of meaningful relationship with strangers, kind of, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Sure.
So I've just realized like I want to be more in front of people, and I miss talking. I like hearing myself talk too, really, when it comes down to it. But
Same.
Long story short, the older I get, the more cynical I become. And I've realized that. And I don't think that's the point of living. And I think like we're supposed to be getting happier and more jovial with the more knowledge we take in, right? So, like if you've noticed any of the branding of what I'm trying to do right now, it's under the guise of like party on forever. And that really is just me trying to fake it till you make it, make myself like be happier and have more fun. So I don't know. I got this whole thing where I'm like working on a YouTube channel and a podcast. I don't have any of it out yet, but like it will be about that, this kind of thing, sit down interviews, just getting back to the point of relationships with people and having a good time and focusing less on finances and work,
Sure, and I that's huge, especially I'm coming from the point when A Plea for Purging ended. We definitely all got the impression that you were just burned out on all of it. Especially and I'm talking more, not necessarily like interviews and stuff that you'd said, but just the vibe that we got from that last record. And, it's so funny too, because I always considered you guys to be like the chillest, partiest, happiest dudes on the face of the earth. And then you actually listen to the songs and it's like some of the most serious stuff, that you could possibly lay down. I always thought that was an interesting dichotomy, and didn't know if you, do you kind of feel like maybe the burnout has faded somewhat? Is that kind of what you're getting at? That it was kind of like, man, I kind of miss some of the stuff, maybe not all of it, but some of it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you hit it right on the head. Like the longer we did, we toured like 200 plus days a year for 7 years. That's a lot of being on the road, which we loved. We loved it a ton in the beginning, and we still loved it at the end. But like, you get burnt out. You start focusing on, we were all in our 30s by the time the band was over. You were not making that much money, and not trying to say it's all about finances, but it is when you want to start families, and John's having a kid and everybody's getting married and all those kind of things. And so it definitely, the road took its toll. And when it was all said and done, I kind of wanted to crawl into a little cave for a little bit, kind of, also, like, you have to be on all the time when you're in that world. Just we call it Mr. Personality.
Yep.
Like when you show up to Wichita, Kansas, right? You're out in the middle of nowhere, and some kid, whether it's a 13-year-old kid or a 25-year-old dude, like whoever it is, like they didn't come to see you on. Like today, maybe I'm not feeling so hot. I'm not feeling so great, and I'm bummed out. They didn't come to see that. They came to see like the dude from the Malevolence video that's hilarious and like a party. You know what? Like exactly what you just said. We were like a party all the time, super fun. Because we got into music and touring and stuff to have fun. We weren't trying to be that super serious, like, play in a dark warehouse video band, that every metal band was trying to be. We were trying to have a good time, so that's what all our videos and our interviews and shirts and stuff were about. But me inside, I'm like a pretty heavy dude, as far as, not only just being a big fat guy, but like inside I'm like, there's a dark cloud, and I'm always thinking all the time. My brain never stops, and why are we here? What's the world about? Is God real? Like, everything you can be thinking about. And so you catch me on that day, but I still have to be the funny fat dude. And so that just got overbearing towards the end, and that's not why we ended the band, but like all of those kind of things compound into being like just a heavy thing. And you decide, okay, I'm ready to shut that out for a while. And, I got out of it, and I found like that I needed to find my identity in myself and my relationship and, with Rachel, and like I have a real life. And now that I've stepped away and I have had time to just like breathe, it feels nice again to try to start interacting with people, with strangers really, and starting new relationships and all that.
Well, we definitely got that vibe, with those final record video blogs that you guys did when you're hanging out in that guy's house, and somebody goes down the hall with the camera and there's Andy in the bathroom. It's like, come on, dude, you having a good time? And you did not look happy, which, that just looks like a band on the road or a band that's been out of the house one day longer than they want to be. So that is what it is. But then the album comes out, and it's called The Life and Death of a Plea for Purging, and we all ate our own words, because the joke for our friends was, God, if that's not right on the nose, we're not going to have any more Plea, and that's going to be a bad day. And it just turned out that, well, that was the last record by Plea.
Yeah, it's crazy. And we didn't write that record to be a farewell record. We didn't even mean for that title to say we were ending, but I think like we were all really close and really self-aware and kept this open, honest conversation about what the band was to each of us through our entire career. So like we had already had conversations about the band being over at that time, but hadn't made any like solid decisions. It was just like, when it's over, we'll all know, you know? So I don't know. It genuinely just grew into being that, you know, like we wrote this record. It's really heavy lyrically, you know, it had quite a bit to do with just my personal life and, you know, all the different things I had going on. And I don't know, but it's crazy once it was out and, you know, you go back and you listen to it and it's just obvious that that's the last record that band's going to put out, you know? Yeah. But, you know, hopefully people like it. That's still like the record that it's not like the best and the heaviest record. I think everybody agree like the heaviest, best record is The Marriage. Maybe that's what most people say, but The Life was, I can still listen to that record and be like, oh yeah, dude, that stuff hits hard. Like lyrical content anyway, for me.
I know The Marriage is his favorite, but for me, it's always been Depravity. That record had its own sound of not artificialness, but it had that atmosphere, and I've compared it to like The Dark Knight, where the score has that sound of electronics, of the light bulb in the corner just ringing out the entire time, and it makes you feel uncomfortable. And Depravity has kind of that same feel, so for me, that hits the most. But he's all about The Marriage.
Well, what I was gonna to jump back onto Life and Death real quick. Speaking of lyrical content, that's the thing, you know, like I'm a metal fan. Obviously our podcast is like all about metal and all that stuff or whatever. But the thing that I get the most out of music, be it heavy music or not, is the lyrical content. And that record, one of the things that I always felt like listening to it is like you were so open and honest about things that were deeply personal, like to the point where like, I wouldn't have shared that with some of that stuff with my best friend. You know what I mean? Like that sort of stuff. So like, was it weird, you know, cause you were talking about, you know, yeah, we got the, you know, Mr. Personality and always wanting to stay, you know, happy and go lucky and all of that. Was it hard for you to open up like that, on a record and be like that emotionally vulnerable?
Yeah. I mean, like, I had nothing to lose at that point, you know, especially that far in our career, and we were all at like, I guess I threw it all out there just because like I guess it was cathartic, you know, like it needed to come out. Like I'm really, I hold everything in. I'm not very emotional. I'm real flat. I don't like to cry, you know, like during that whole, you know, the elephant in the room of that record is like my mom killed herself, right? And I talk about it in that record. And so, you know, that was really heavy and I cried super hard, like crazy, like can't even imagine, you know, like, but I don't like that. I don't like being that person. I don't like crying. I don't like the way it makes me feel. And so like you bottle up all that stuff and you just get really hard. And if you don't find some other way to let it out, then it's just going to kill you, you know? Sure. And I was just always really lucky that the dudes in my band and Jason at Face Down and any of the fans that followed us from point A to Z allowed me to be vulnerable and open like that. Because I talk about like a lot of stuff throughout that record and Marriage both. Like, we're a quote unquote Christian band. I'll say we were a Christian band, right? I mean, when we first started, I would stand on stage and damn near give like an altar call, right? Or at least be like the whole, like, we're here for Jesus, he loves you thing. So I have weird, I don't really know what Christian band means at this point, but for the sake of it. We'll just say we're a Christian band. And then throughout our career, like towards the end, you get there, you're pretty much saying like, is God real? Like, do I believe in God? And I'm not sure I want to be on his side. Like, those are things that like were being said in our records, and we're on a Christian label. And like, it's just really cool that our fan base and our label and the dudes behind me that actually have way stronger faith. Everything that I say, I can only speak for myself. I'm not speaking for them. They like allowed me to be that honest about my spiritual walk and everything I was doing or dealing with. So I don't know. I was really blessed to have like a support system, and it's cool that I was able to get that stuff off my chest and talk about it. And the hope is that those things, being vulnerable like that, gives anybody else the strength to get through whatever they're getting through. Right?
Yeah, totally. And like that makes me happy as a fan that helped you. You know what I mean? Because like you listen, you're a fan of a dude, you love lyrics and performances and all that stuff. And yeah, maybe it starts off as just entertainment. Like, man, this band's got some sweet riffs. You know what I mean? Like it starts off like that, but over time you kind of develop that relationship with the fans lyrically. And, you know, it always concerns me whenever I'll hear somebody getting really, 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 really real, but it's refreshing to hear that it was cathartic for you. It wasn't like you're like, I'm getting it out versus just wallowing in it. You know what I mean? Like, you know, and we don't get that very often. I think one of the weirdest dichotomies between being a fan of music is if you're mad, you're going to write super heavy stuff, which metalheads put above everything else, right? But if you're not mad and you're happy, your music reflects that as well. And so it's that weird dichotomy where like we want you to be happy and good, but we also want you to be mad to put out brutal music, you know?
Yeah.
And so that was always really weird for me. But yeah, that record was just so heavy in the sense of like lyrically, I'd say the lyrics were heavier than the music, you know, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure.
And to make it more laughable, I was playing a song. I think it was. Oh, it might have been something. I think it was Heart of a Child, actually, in front of one of my kids one time. She said that that it sounded like basketballs bouncing on the floor of a gym, just because of how bouncy and genty it was, and all that. And I was like, that's a unique perspective. I've never heard that before.
You just gave me a great idea for just like a YouTube channel of you just get little kids that review metalcore bands. That'd be funny.
There you go. Well, I got one that would audition for sure. We had one time. I don't remember who we were listening to, but and I won't say it because I don't want to like slam them or whatever. I remember we were listening to a band together, and my kid was like, "Why is he screaming like that?" And I'm like, "Well, you know, that's just the way people in metal bands scream. You know, that's how they sing or whatever." And she's like, "No," she goes, "I've heard other metal bands scream, and it's a lot better than this." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "I don't know." She's like, she goes, "It sounds like he's just yelling to be annoying. It doesn't sound like he's actually mad about anything." I was
that's like, funny.
Oh my God. Like, yeah. That's why metal is kind of silly in its own way. But yeah, like Joe was saying about the marriage, that is my favorite Plea record just because of how pissed off it is. And some of the stuff that is said on that record even is kind of some of the scariest stuff. I remember like being with like church friends and stuff and popping that record, and there was stuff that was said on it that just made people super uncomfortable, you know, like,
yeah, for sure.
But like, that's good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was the whole point. Like, not that I guess we're trying to ruffle feathers. Like, I mean, it's just, you know, I've done a ton of interviews about it, but like, you know, in the end, there's like this industry. There's a Christian music industry. There is a industry to sell God to people, and we were right in the middle of it, and that's crazy. And we just saw a lot of crazy stuff that we didn't really agree with, and were a part of things that probably did things we didn't agree to in the beginning or whatever. I don't know. And I don't know. It's just, if you're immersed in it and that's all you see, you write about your surroundings, right? That record just started as me just writing about my surroundings. That's everything I've ever done. It's just write songs about my experiences. So every song was about this same thing. You know, I don't think we started like saying, hey, let's write a song calling out everybody we know, you know, but like that's kind of what it ended up being in the end. And I don't know, like it is for sure musically the heaviest thing we ever did. I think it might be one of the heavier records of all time. You know, that's a lofty statement, but you know, it's, 10 years ago, so I can say it now, right?
Yeah, dude, you're fine.
It's super heavy, and it's pissed, man. It's like, that's got to be like the most pissed record a Christian band's ever done, right? Right.
100%. I mean, whenever you're just gonna yell, "If I was God, we'd all be dead," like that's. I mean, whew, like the way that rolls over with people that are maybe listening to more Christian music. See, at that point in my life, I was listening to Christian music because that's what I grew up listening to, but also listening to a lot of secular stuff. And I remember a buddy of mine was like, well, what's the difference between this and the secular bands or whatever? And I was like, I don't know if there's like a difference, but it's one of those like you were saying, you guys were a Christian band, but there weren't a lot of Christian bands that were being that real about stuff, at that time. Like, it's like, I remember, and I'm sorry if I'm talking too much during this interview. People always complain that I talk too much when I interview people. But one of the things is that like Joe and I were writing some songs for a band that we were in for like 5 minutes. And we remember I was writing lyrics with a buddy of mine, and his wife was like reading over the lyrics for some reason. We didn't ask her to, but she just took it on herself to do so. And she's like, where's the positive resolution in this song? And I was like, what do you mean positive resolution? And she's like, the positive resolution, like where's the point where, and I was like, what, where the ceiling opens up and Jesus just descends down and all of this beautiful glory and makes it all better. I was like, this is still something that I'm struggling with. Like, I'm still feeling this, like it's not something that I've gotten over, And it seemed like that was the sentiment. And then you guys come along with a record that's like, and even Depravity before that was like deeply negative. And I'm not saying that to like slam it, but it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you're gonna have negative experiences, and they're gonna taint you. They're gonna taint your life, and like you're not just gonna get out of it, in 5 minutes because somebody told you to read more scripture or to, or whatever it is. And so, I mean, I appreciated that you guys were so honest and that you were allowed to be honest. Yeah,
dude, that's the thing. Like it all, I owe it all to like the other dudes in the band and Jason at Facedown for just allowing me to be that, cause like Jason signed us as one thing, like our first record, Critique of Mind and Thought, like, which is awful. I think like I'm not a fan. I can pretty much like look back and respect and be proud of everything we did at Depravity and on, but not, I could wipe Critique off and be fine with it. But Jason signed that band. He signed a metal band that sounded like Dragon Force and Iron Maiden with a dude that screamed on top, and all of our lyrics were like the most like stereotypical Christian warfare, like spiritual warfare lyrics that every single Christian metalcore band did, right? Yeah. And I don't mean that negative to like John, our bass player, was writing a lot of the lyrics at that time. When I joined the band, he was already like the lyricist. So I'm not slamming him because that's like the way that he those metaphors make sense to him and they're deep to him. And he was, that's his walk. And then like when I took over, I was like, hey, if I'm going to be singing in this band, I want to be writing about my life and my stuff. And that's kind of like, it got more real and more personal at Depravity. And I don't really know how to wrap my brain around this thought because it just popped in my head as you were talking. But like maybe the whole arc of A Plea for Purging is this. Like all of our videos and our shirts and us as dudes are funny and humorous and like party good time boys. But all the lyrics of every record we did, Depravity On, are really negative and pretty heavy. And because that's where I'm at when I'm all alone in my head with nobody else. But maybe that whole thing is just to show everybody that like we're all dealing with those like negative, heavy, like deep, dark, you're in your corner alone thing. Like everybody's got their own thing, but you have that. You got something inside of you that I don't know about that's heavy and dark, right? And I have the same shit. But the whole point is to try to work through those things so that we can be the good time party boys that are having a good time. Because I don't want to be that person that, like, in my little dark hole. I don't want to be that person out in public bringing you guys down, So I'm trying to, like, have a good time and be that positive, good time dude. I could probably wrap that up into a more concise statement if I had a few weeks to think about it. But that's probably what Plea for Purging was just like, yo, we're dealing with some heavy stuff, but we're getting through it and we're going to have a good time while we're doing it kind of thing.
That's one thing that I think is very unique to A Plea for Purging. You had very serious, very intense motifs, but when it came down to how the listener and how I was going to be experiencing that at a show, it was 100% positive. It's cool, dude. We're all going through it. Let's go through it together. It's all going to be fine. Everybody picks on, like, A Sleeping Giant for being way too preachy, but that was their thing. They were 100%, here is the message. We're going to present it in a heavy way. Whereas you guys had the feeling of, I'm going to say more reality, less spiritual, but you presented it in a spiritually supportive way. You were positive guys. I remember when you came to St. Louis one time, somebody right at the front of the stage just said, Andy, are you guys going to play Malevolence? Yes, we are. And that was it. And everybody was psyched at that point forward because we knew, all right, Andy said they're going to play Malevolence. Everything's going to be great. And I never saw a fight at your shows. I never saw anybody getting mad at each other or pushing each other around. It was, guys, we're at a Plea show. This is going to be great.
There were definitely some scenes and states where it wasn't that that positive, and there were fights. It all depended on where you were in the country, but for the most part, yeah, that was the vibe we were trying to put out. Man, was like, it's a good time. We're here to have fun. We're here to party. Like, I want to see 100 stage dives during one song. Like, it was just all about having a good time because that's the only point in doing it. Like, if I was having a miserable time on stage or having a miserable time on tour, like, I should be at home, And so the whole vibe was just like, yo, let's make this the funnest 30 minutes that we can, And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't, It depended on if we were playing to a room of like 300 to 1,000 people, it's pretty easy to have a good time. When you're playing to like 30 people, you have to really fight for it, man. And sometimes it worked out and sometimes it didn't. I mean, there's internet videos of us on YouTube playing in rooms to like 7 people, like for real, like mid-career, So like that's pretty heavy.
Yeah. Well, if I can, I want to circle back to to what you were saying about, we've all kind of got our own shit, right? Like, we've got our own stuff that we're dealing with. And I mean, and I feel like you said it best on the last record. And I wish I remember the name of the song, but I listened to everything on shuffle today. But you said, we've all got hell at our backs. We fight the same fights in different places with different faces. And that really connected with me because, it's like, absolutely the truth. Like, you know what I mean? Like, in the sense of, like what Joe was saying, how you guys presented everything in a way of reality, and that we're all stressed out, we're all messed up. And so, like, how great is it that we can all get together at a show and kind of like exercise that to a certain exercise, not exercise, or maybe exercise, but that's that's the thing that always got me. And it's just, I heard that lyric when I was driving home from work, and I was like, dude, I gotta like talk to this guy about stuff tonight, and not be like, do you remember when you said blah 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 on blah 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 album? That was awesome.
Dude, I do remember those lyrics. What's funny is like I'd have a hard time remembering some of our song titles, but that one is, the title is in that lyric. It's With Hell at Our Backs.
That's right.
At least I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. But man, those lyrics are heavy, dude. When you were reciting that, I was like, man, that is heavy, and just got me all thinking. And I have to believe that I might be one of the greatest lyricists of all time. But
bam,
yeah,
that's the blabbermouth headline tomorrow morning. Yeah,
yeah, right. Yeah, dude. We are though. We're all fighting. Like, I mean, there's some people like Rachel, my fiance, dude. She's not like me in my head, dude. She just like skates through life feeling pretty happy about most things. She has days where like, she's bitchy about something, or like, like in a bad mood. But for the most part, she doesn't like wrestle with all these existential like dealings inside of her. And like there are people like that. And I wish I was one of those people. But I'm so heavily like rooted in that stuff that like, dude, there's not a day that goes by in my life that I don't question like science, God, my life, like what am I here for? Is there a point? Like, does my life do any of these thoughts even matter? Am I just like an organism floating through space? Like, dude, like I think about that stuff all the time. I'm scared to death of dying. Like, it's just, I'm all wrapped up in it. So everybody's got some little fight, it's just a different face behind it. But then there's some people that can just walk through life and everything's pretty easy for them,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, my wife's very similar. People are always like, what do you guys have in common? Because you're like this super mad dude all the time. And, she tends to be more on the bright and cheerful side of things. Joe's laughing. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. But it's just one of those like, and I almost feel like guys like that, we just need somebody to balance that out, in a way.
For sure. That's like, Rachel's been my saving grace, man. Like, she's, there were probably years where I would have not been like in public or a part of any social setting if it wasn't for her, because like, I get where I could just be like at home in my sweatpants and, I think it's depression maybe, but like just, all of our friends are hanging out and I'm like, oh no, I'm good. I'll stay home, and Rachel like pulls me out and makes me be a part of that. And, I think it's good to have that counterbalance of you're negative, she's positive, and she, is the light to your darkness, dude.
There it is. There it is. That's a free one. Now, speaking of amazing lyrics, you said that you didn't write the lyrics on A Critique of Mind and Thought, but on The Betrayers, whenever you scream, make them say, that was all you, right?
Yeah, that is probably me, and I don't even remember that. That is so sick.
Dude, it's our favorite part of the song. It's like, make them say, Did you get that gang vocal? And that was the first time I was like, this dude listens to rap.
Yeah, for sure. Dude, that's funny, dude. I don't even remember that. Like, because we'd stop playing any of those songs. Like, like right around Depravity, we were like, okay, we're done with this stuff. But I did write some of the lyrics on that record, but a good bit of them were from when John was writing lyrics on our EPs.
The Betrayers is probably one of my favorite of the old Plea songs, just because it's super shred-tastic. And but I agree with you. Like, it's funny you say you think that record's bad, dude. I ran a blog for like 2 years that I called A Critique of Mind and Thought.blogspot.com.
Cool, dude. That's sick.
Copyright infringement for the win.
I'm pretty sure that we stole that title from it's actually in the liner notes. There's like a a passage from this guy's like thesis, and I think that his thesis was called A Critique of Mind and Thought. It's been so long ago I can't even remember it, but I remember like me or Aaron, I think it was Aaron, read it and was like, dude, we need to write a record about this. But it's cool that record means something to some people. Like, dude, I did the interview a couple days ago with another guy that like that's his favorite record and he loved it. And so I'm super stoked that exists and people latched onto it. It's just the reason I hate that record is because of my performance on it, to be honest. Lyrically, I rushed some of the stuff that I did. Vocally, I wasn't prepared and like underperformed, and I was really relying on the guy that recorded us to try to like make my vocals sound better. And we did a lot of layering, and then he kind of botched all the editing on the vocals, which if I would have just been stronger vocally at the time, then I wouldn't have had to rely on him. So it was a lot of the technical aspect of the vocals and where they sat in the mix and how bad I did that makes me hate that record, just being honest. Sure. I don't really, if it was a perfect sounding record and I did great on it, I'm not ashamed that we're like a metal band, that's cool. Right. People like that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's you guys filtered it out too slowly, like, because obviously Depravity's got more shred on it, than the Marriage, and so I mean it was a subtle drop off of that stuff, which I think was appreciated for guitar players like Joe over there, But I remember being all in for the heavy, because I remember hearing Depravity and being like, man, when did Plea turn into a gent band? Like, these guys are like, I don't even know if we even said the word gent back then, but like it was, I remember being like, man, this is like really speaks to it. And it's crazy too, because I heard that record and then I went and saw you guys play like 2-3 weeks later, and I bought that record, the EP, and Depravity in, I think you guys were only charging like $5 each for the record, which is something that you guys were always doing. Was that some kind of like your guys' merch and CDs and stuff? It was always super cheap, like not cheaply made, but like cheaply, like, charged way less than the other bands. And so like you could walk out from another band and pay $10 for their CD, but you could walk out with 2 Plea CDs for $10. Was that something, especially with some of the lyrical content on the Marriage and about money making, was that like a conscious thing for you guys where you're trying to like make it not as much about money? Or
I think there is a humble side of it like that is true to us, and then a business side too. Like I grew up in hardcore and punk rock and going to hardcore shows where it never costs more than $5 to get into a show, and you could buy a EP or demo for $3 and a t-shirt for $8, and so when we got into it and started touring, like, and over that like we toured for like 7 years, over that amount of time, like things changed so much, like in the music industry and the way that music was sold and consumed. And when we first started, shows cost $5, and when we quit at the end, shows were like almost $20. It's crazy. Yeah. But so yeah, I mean, we wanted people to have our records. Like, if it cost us $5 to get a CD from Face Down, basically, like, we got some for free, but basically it cost us $5 to buy a CD from Face Down. Then we could sell it for whatever we wanted. We could sell it for $100 if we wanted to, and we get $95 back. But if we just sold it for the same amount of money that we got it from Face Down, then we covered our cost, and you got a CD, and then you learn our songs, and then you show up to the next show, and you know the lyrics, and you sing along, or like it positively affected you somehow. That was the main idea behind that. And also, being completely honest, like at that time in the music industry, sound scans, like how many records you sold, meant what tours you were going to get to go on and where you played on that tour. Like if you'd only sold 10,000 records and you got some tour, you might only get to play like second of 4 and only make, a couple $100 a night. But if you'd sold 20 or 30,000 records, then you got to play third or fourth on that tour and make $1,000 a night. So it's all like about the long con or the long game, like sell your CDs cheap so you sell a lot of them. So in the end, you get to play better tours and make more money on that tour. And then the T-shirts was really the way that we all made money. Like the first 3 years of our band, none of us took any kind of payout. We got like $5 a day on good days to get to eat. And like when we came home from tour, no one made any money and no one lived anywhere. We all lived in our like friends' like apartments on their couches. And like I was literally homeless for like 2 or 3 years of my life. For real. No mailing address, no home. Would roll my sleeping bag out at a different person's house every time we went home. And so it was right when we figured out the merch thing that we all figured out how to like pay for our places to live. So you make as many T-shirt designs as possible. One that's funny and goofy cartoon, one that's super serious like deathcore metal, one that's like a hardcore band T-shirt. Like you have something that appeals to everybody and you make it as flashy and as big as possible. So when you walk by our table and you've never even heard of our band, but that shirt looks cool, we're just a soundtrack to a clothing store at that point. And you buy a T-shirt from us and we sell it $2 or $3 cheaper than the band next to us. So that way we sell 20 more T-shirts than they did that night. And then I get to actually live in an apartment, like a $400 a month apartment that was 400 square foot, like it was meek livings at that time. But like, that was when we figured out how to like, make a living, if you want to call it that. Also like, we thought we were the coolest thing in the world when we had this big, huge trailer and a big, huge back line and like banners and scrims and all that stuff. And that stuff was cool. And we like fit in with everybody and we could go play with As Lay Dying and look like a professional band and all that stuff. But when we scaled back and got rid of the trailer and got rid of all that stuff and we put all our gear in the back of our van and then like roughed it, that's when we started being able to like live in $1,000 a month apartments, and like sustain the band for a few more years.
So whose idea was it to make you into the Incubus guy of metal?
Dude, I don't know how like it all started. Like you're talking about like me being on shirts and all that, right? Like,
yes.
Yeah, like your face being on a baby's body.
It seriously just started as like we took some pictures. It was in Oklahoma. Where we used to play this place in Claremore, Oklahoma called The Tree. And we took some promo pictures with some guy. And one of the outtakes was a picture of me winking, right? It's like that main picture that was used on like a lot of stuff. It's just like, hey, can I get a picture for my MySpace? It was like one of those kind of pictures.
Yeah.
And I do a wink. And Blake is like Blake used to do like a lot of our T-shirt designs, our guitar player Blake, and he was messing around in the van on the laptop one day, and he showed us that thing and goes, "Hey man, let's put this on a shirt and see if it does anything. Let's just put your signature on the back and see if it sells." And they were like, "Are you okay with that? Are you good with it?" And I was like, "Man, I guess so." Like, and really at the time, I wish I would have said, "Hey, can I get like $1 per T-shirt or something?" Since it's my face.
And then we'd have to pay you to talk to you. That's where it would have gone.
Because by the end of it, dude, like with all honesty, not inflating anything, and I don't have any real data, but like thousands upon thousands upon thousands of T-shirts in the world that had my face on them, and people bought them and wore them, and that's crazy. It felt good, It's funny, like you're walking around, you see somebody with your shirt on in the mall, and it's your face, and then people are like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa," I owe you $1.
There you go,
nice.
Andy.
So to go back in time a little bit more, even before the Plea days, as far as I know. I actually watched a ton of videos that was for a merch company called Zambui.com, and that's actually how I became I don't want to say acquainted with you because that's creepy, but like saw your stuff, and it was just you doing interviews and stuff, and it was like, and I believe that company was either owned or at least operated by Bruce Fitzhugh, a Living Sacrifice. I just wanted to see what that was like for you working there and what your role was there in the company.
Yeah, Zambui was like right when e-commerce came about, when people first realized, oh, we can use the internet to sell stuff. We were kind of like on the ground floor in that, especially for like any kind of band merchandise. So Zambui was like probably the first like online merch store for bands. We did all of the Tooth and Nail and Solid State roster, and all Mono versus Stereo, a bunch of other labels and bands. But I got a job there through Bruce. I'd met him like early on when I played in another band, and then also Mark Emery, who was the drummer of Mortal Treason, if you happen to remember that band.
I do.
My band and their band toured together, my like first metal band, I guess. And so I got a job there, and I was just screen printing. That's like, I've had a few jobs in my life of screen printing, and that was the first one. I learned the art of that, and it was cool. So I was jamming there, doing that, basically just going in every day, listening to loud heavy metal and rock and roll and hardcore, real loud, and screen printing t-shirts all day long. And it was very lax, and it was like that whole startup vibe. There was no rules. Like everybody was just kind of flying by the seat of their pants. And then I have a really good work ethic. I'm not the kind of guy that's late ever. And I was like late one day. First time ever being late. And I guess that was the day they were going to decide, like, we're going to crack down on people being late.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, Zambui was owned and operated by Bruce from from Sacrifice, and then Mike Lewis, who played in the band Pooler, and he was in For Love Not Lisa, if you know either one of those bands.
Yeah, I do.
So those two dudes ran the company along with another guy nobody would know, but Mike, who was pretty much like functioning CEO, I guess he was like head honcho. He pulled me in his office and was furious about me being late and was gonna like fire me. And that same exact day, the same dude that was doing online content for them, like we put out videos and stuff when bands would come through town, we'd do like interviews and shoot the live shows and stuff just to try to generate some traffic to the website. Rado, the guy that was doing all their stuff at the time, bailed or something and couldn't do this interview with Spoken and Project 86. And somebody told Mike, yo, you shouldn't fire him. He's hilarious, because he didn't really know me that well at the time. He's funny. You should send him out and have him do the video tonight, the interview tonight. And he was like, pretty much, all right, if you go prove yourself tonight and it's funny, then you can keep your job here. And I went, and I knew very little about their bands, and made a fool of myself, and everybody thought it was funny, and I got to keep my job there. So my day job was screen printing, but then like started being pretty like, into the video content stuff there, and did all kinds of stuff for them over the years. And it was cool. I made like some extra cash doing it, and got to become like an internet superstar for like 5 minutes.
It was cool because I remember going to that website, and originally I just went there to buy merch, you know what I mean? Like everybody did. And I remember seeing those videos, and I was like, this dude's hilarious. And this is kind of like, I don't remember if it was before YouTube or not.
It was
YouTube
actually,
was
dude,
like what?
I was struggling whether I was going to say that just a second ago. I do think it was like, it was definitely before YouTube was what YouTube is now.
Right.
It's like, I think we were hosting our videos on our site, and through the years finally started I was only there a couple years, but through my time there, we started funneling some of those videos onto YouTube because YouTube started becoming like a place that people would go to watch videos, you know? But yeah, it was kind of before like people just went to YouTube to watch stuff, you know?
Well, yeah, and if nobody even knows what I'm talking about, these videos were insane. There was one where you literally somebody literally bench pressed Bruce Fitzhugh on a, like literally got down on the floor and bench pressed Bruce Fitzhugh on screen. And I remember being like, this is the coolest thing in the entire world that I've ever seen, because for whatever reason Bruce comes across as a super serious dude all the time,
for sure.
And so to see him participating in something like that was like, oh my God. Like I remember just being like really, really, really thinking that was funny. But one of the reason I bring up Zambui the most was, and I don't even know if you were doing this for Zambui or not, but there is a Cornerstone video of you walking around. I want to say this was later. I don't know if it was related to Zambui or not, but you were walking around Cornerstone interviewing bands.
Yeah,
for some reason.
That was after Zambui. That was like once we got on Face Down, and I joined Plea. We got on Face Down, and then we were kind of just trying to capitalize on that. Like, oh, I used to be the Zambui guy, so Face Down like had me go around and interview a bunch of bands and stuff. But yeah, it was always fun, man. That whole Zambui like years were really fun because it was. I grew up in a really small town in Paris, Tennessee, like a couple hours away from Nashville. Like without the internet, that's before the internet was even really like a big deal. You had to find music through like friends and Christian bookstores and that kind of thing. And so like, you know, I like loved Living Sacrifice, and I loved Pooler, and I loved Blenderhead, and I loved Tooth and Nail Records, right? And then fast forward like 5 years later or whatever, I'm working at Zambui with Bill Power from Blenderhead, which is like the first tape that I ever bought with my own money was Blenderhead. And then like Living Sacrifices was one of the first metal bands I ever went and saw live. And I loved Pooler. And so I'm just like in the middle of like, I don't want to say my heroes, but as a kid, if you would have told me when I was like 15 that I was going to be working with those three people, I mean, like Bill Power is a part of putting out some of the like most legendary records that I've ever cared about at Tooth and Nail. You know, I was a diehard Tooth and Nail kid. So just getting in the middle of all that and being like surrounded by all that was so fun. And it really was a good party, like vibe of it being a startup. And I mean, we'd be screen printing, and then all of a sudden, let's make a video of like throwing Adam through a table or something, you know? And it was exciting.
Yeah, I was stupid enough to eat up every single bit of it. You know, like I was just like, oh my God, I'd like call up my friend Buddy and be like, dude, you got to come over to my house and watch this video. And like, really weird that I would do, like, we didn't have smartphones then, so I couldn't be like, go watch this video. Maybe I could have, but I made him come over to my house and watch it anyway. But that's it was, cool. Old school. But, you know, and I remember one particular interview where you were interviewing other Facedown bands. I think it was you interviewed Death Star and Seventh Star. And it was like when you asked each one of them, you're like, hey dude, I heard that Death Star's trying to take the star from you guys. And I almost died because like I loved all those bands, you know, and like to hear somebody ask that absurd of a question and then they actually answered it. Like he was like, well, if we ever had to fight it out over the star, I mean, I'd hate to see that, but if they did, then, you know, we'd have to pack a lunch or something. Like it was insane. And like, that's what I went into. That's what I went into a Plea for Purging with. You know, like whenever I found out that you were singing for a Plea for Purging, I was like, well, what's this going to be? Because this dude's just straight goof. And then whenever I listened to the albums, I was like, yeah, people are a lot more complicated than I thought that they were. You know?
Yeah, dude. That was so fun, man. Like, joining Facedown was so sick because like, I mean, I was a fan from the beginning. Like I had like the second like little sampler they ever put out. So I was total Facedown kid. But like when we joined, we were just like some goofy dudes from Tennessee, and like we're thrown in the midst of all these like hard, throat tattooed, like hardcore dudes from Southern California and Florida. And like all those dudes are so serious, like the Death Star dudes. And like it was those videos are so funny because it's just me like clowning and on those dudes and like not really understanding how serious they are until we're in the middle of hitting record. Like right. I remember interviewing Justin from X Looking Forward X. And when I'm interviewing him, I say something about looking forward, and he goes, "It's X looking forward X." And I was like, oh my gosh, like this dude is so intensely serious. Which, dude, looking forward was so sick. So I'm not slamming them, but like that's when I was like, oh man, like we're in the middle of some real shit right now, and like we're just trying to be funny.
Right. That is hilarious. And yeah, like did you ever feel the need like to be serious? Like there had to be moments where you felt like I don't want to be and maybe we've already talked about this too much, but like there had to be moments where you felt like, you know, man, I don't want to meet anybody new right now. And I fast forwarded like way too many years into the band after what we were talking about. But like, is there ever a point where because I get this way to a certain extent, like when somebody tells me to check out a new band or, hey, so-and-so wants to do an interview or yada, yada, yada. Did you ever just reach that point where you were like, man, I don't want to meet anybody else new. I don't want to have to joke around. I don't want to have to be funny. Like, I feel like you already answered this, but I'm
sure.
Like,
I mean, it got that way for sure. But you always had to remember that like we were granted with like an opportunity that everybody else ever wished they could do. You know what I mean? Like, and we're, with lack of not trying to sound goofy, but we were blessed to be able to have that opportunity to jam. Yeah.
Well, you said blessed, so now I can market this interview to Christian sites. So perfect.
Tight.
Yeah, exactly. Joe, get out the bleeper in case we ever said if we said any no words, and it'll all be good. And this is something that I ask everybody, and I don't know if you're going to be able to top what David from the Showdown said in his interview.
Probably not. That dude's hilarious.
Dude, some of the stuff that he threw down, I was like, oh my God. Like, but being in the Christian music industry, what was like some weird stuff? And I'm not asking you to name names or slam anybody or anything, but like some of the weirdest stuff that you'd been asked to do or asked to say because you were a Christian band and there were people that were like expecting you to do a certain thing that you really weren't stoked about doing?
Yeah, I mean, we were definitely like, we were asked to like lead altar calls and like, that whole thing, like bring kids to the Lord, have kids come down to the altar and pray over everyone. And that whole thing. And maybe towards the beginning of the band, I don't know that we ever had like a legit altar call, but towards the beginning of the band, like I was more open to that stuff because I thought that's what it was. I thought that's what my point in doing it all was. Sure. And then I realized I was just going through the motions and just doing it because that's what was expected of us, So, I mean, within a first year or two of our band, I realized like that's not what I'm trying to accomplish here. So I was pretty quick to, anytime we were asked to do anything like that, I had to be like, yo, man, I'm sorry, but that's not us. And, if we need to like take a 5-minute break and you come up and talk to some kids or something, that's fine. And we had that happen a couple times, and that's always like just a bummer. if you're playing in the middle of a heavy set and everybody's having a great time, and then the youth pastor wants to come up and talk to kids about, true love waits or whatever it is, it ruins the whole vibe of the show. But if a church is paying you $1,000 to come rock their gig, then let them do whatever they want to do, and you guys got to coincide. But our hardest thing was always like, we go do a headlining tour, and we'd play like some Christian markets and some general markets, but we would take out like secular bands with us, right? So
right.
I can remember a tour where we were playing and we took out Within the Ruins, and we played this like church venue thing, and there was like a huge thing. I can't remember exactly what happened, but there was like so much drama about them playing, and their sound was cut in the middle of their set, and I had to like go to bat for them, one, it makes us look bad because we're playing at a Christian venue, and it's our team that cut their sound off, you know what I mean? And then I have to go to the promoters in the church and be like, yo, this is our tour. These are dudes that we like respect and want them to be on this tour with us, and you just cut their sound. So there was always those kind of things that playing the Christian venues and the Christian markets were always pretty hard, but also like this is something people don't want to talk about and be honest about, but like the Christian shows will pay you more money than the secular shows will pay you. And, if you're trying to pay your bills and figure out a balance, maybe you have to play some of those sometime to go and play the bar show, the next show. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That's something people don't want to admit. And like, I don't know, that's a whole nother podcast, but I don't know. We don't look back at that whole, we're not negative about the fact that we did shit in the Christian industry.
Sure.
But it was a weird line we had to walk. I remember playing festivals where I remember getting in trouble at Ichthus Festival because they said, hey, you have to announce that there is a prayer tent, and after your set, please push kids to this prayer tent. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And they're like, yeah, you got to. It's part of your contract or something. So when we played on stage, I go, hey, I'm being forced by this festival to tell you that there is a prayer tent over there, and there are people that I don't know and I don't respect, and I can't tell you anything about them because I've never met them personally. But those people over in that tent say that they have some things to say to you. I can tell you that you can go talk to them, or you can come talk to me or my 3 friends that are behind me, and we'll try to be as honest to you about our lives and what we got going on as possible. And that made the festival pretty fucking enraged, and we weren't allowed to play there anymore. But we had a lot of those festivals where we were kicked out of.
That's got to be awkward for the youth pastor. All right, kids, true love waits. And now a plea for purging. This song is called Retribution. You couldn't stop this if you tried.
Yeah,
I did.
I was even thinking like an altar call. So there's like altar call, and then you jump up there. Whorehouses are built with the bricks of religion. It's like, oh my goodness, But I love that stuff, man. I felt because I had the benefit of being like a Christian hardcore kid when I was a kid, and so as I grew up as an adult, kind of got like, I didn't mean this to like slam anybody that is that way, but like I've gotten to the point where a lot of you guys, a lot of bands like Plea and the Showdown and bands like that, like as I grew up as you guys were growing up, none of it ever came across to me as like weird or like out of nowhere or whatever. It's like, yeah, these guys are talking about stuff that like I'm actually experiencing, and
that's the hope, is that your fan base are growing with you, right? Like look at a band like Thrice, like completely different band than us and like way more successful, but like not only did they start out as one thing musically and lyrically, but like look at the most recent record that they put out lyrically and musically, and like they've grown so much, and their fan base is like chosen to grow with them, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, hopefully that's what I feel like that's the majority of what our listeners did with us in our time. But there are definitely those that like, you know, jumped off train when we were, you know, getting darker or crazier or whatever we were doing. Or you got some like broad-eyed, bushy-tailed like Christian kid that comes in right around mid like Marriage of Heaven and Hell record cycle, and they're like, what are these angry dudes doing here at our church right now? You know?
Did he just yell, "Your God is dead," like over and over and over again? Because I don't know if that's, and it's like, no, he's talking about money, like their God's money. Yeah, but he said, "Your God is dead." It's like, yeah, I know he said that, but it's not what you're thinking.
That song was like hard to sing at some places, dude. I'm not gonna lie.
It was great though, man. I love stuff that ruffles feathers, you know, and like it's that's like we were talking a while back on a Cannibal Corpse episode that we did where we we for some reason decided to listen to all 14 Cannibal Corpse albums and talk about them. And I know when we were at the end of it, we were like, you know, here's the thing, man. Nobody listens to heavy music because they want other people to like it. You listen to heavy music to freak people out, you know, to a degree. So like if you're riding in the car with your boss one day, what are you going to put on? You're not going to put on whatever's on the radio. You're going to put on Meat Hook Sodomy by Cannibal Corpse just to see what kind of reaction that you're going to get out of that person. And so like heavy metal in general, you know, is so based on that shock value. But I think to a certain degree, you guys definitely tried to keep it real. And I guess one of the things you've had mixed responses over the years on interviews about heavy metal. Is heavy metal predominantly your favorite genre, or do you kind of go all over?
Dude, I'm everywhere. I definitely grew up like, you know, I started with like grunge, and that's when I like really like locked on to music and it being important to me. But soon after grunge, I got into like punk rock and hardcore. So like I fall on that end of the spectrum a little more than I do metal. But you know, like I definitely got into like, you know, metal. I mean, I got into like Zayo and Norma Jean a whole lot, and like that like metal core, I guess, is like about as metallic as I get. Like I don't jam a whole lot of like crazy real metal. Like if you know, you guys are probably like way more schooled in metal and all the different facets of black metal and you know, death metal and progressive metal and all that. I've always wanted something that's a little more like catchy and sing along to, you know. Sure. So like all the dudes in my band loved Meshuggah, like love them, and you can tell that over the last few records, right? Yeah. I don't really care about Meshuggah. Like, I mean, I get it, it's sick, some of the polyrhythm stuff and the guitars and all that, it's insane. But I love Comeback Kid, right? So it was like, okay, let's figure out how to be a metal band, but have like more sing-along parts, like which we never mastered. Like there are bands that pulled it off way better than us, I think. Like I was always trying to figure out how to have the most like catchy vocal patterns for that crazy time signature stuff we did. And they didn't really give me much to work with, you know, like it was always so crazy and like super, like how am I supposed to write a vocal pattern over top of this, you know? Now I get why, like that dude from Meshuggah, that dude, just everything he does is like you know, and
has to do.
Yeah. And so I was trying to actually do something that was like, you know, somewhat catchy enough where people would want to sing along to it, but it was hard.
Well, it came off kind of rappy in places, and I actually dug that more than I probably would have admitted to my friends at the time, because there was a little bit of that rap influence in there, and I especially I felt like on the Marriage, it was more that, and I actually really appreciated it. I've been going through this weird renaissance lately where I'm kind of like giving rap a chance after 30 years.
Word.
And I'm starting to really get into some of it. And so when I went back and listened to these Plea records, to kind of get prepped up for the interview and make sure I actually knew what I was talking about and stuff, I started noticing that in the vocal patterns and stuff, that it was very rhythmic. Maybe it was an accident or whatever. But then I look back at like cover songs that you guys did. Like there was that cover song of what was it, Live Your Life, that I can only find on YouTube.
Yeah, we did Live Your Life. We did Big Papa by B.I.G.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we were really me and Aaron and John. Like Blake's not really a hip hop guy too much, but like we were all pretty heavily influenced by hip hop. And I mean, like when we pre-pro'd any of our music, like before we'd go into the studio, it was usually me and Aaron in a room recording together. Aaron was our drummer. So, I'd bring a bunch of lyrics and a bunch of vocal patterns, and I'd come in and like pre-pro out records or songs. And Aaron, who was like more into hip hop than me even, would like help me like, come up with some better vocal patterns, like help me play some stuff when I was struggling. So, dude, I'll tell you who does that like really, really well is Gideon.
Oh my God. Yes.
Dan and Jake, Jake, the drummer, writes like all the lyrics and the vocal patterns. But Dan's vocals are insane and amazing. And those dudes work so well together to just have really, really catchy, like just strong vocal patterns. And it's very hip hop influenced, man.
Yeah, especially on their newer record, man. That thing blew me away. That was another super controversial record that came out, but like it was, I mean, I saw those guys play, I guess it was with Norma Jean last summer, I want to say. I don't think it's been that long, but like Gideon opened up the show and they just like, we're in St. Louis, so they like brought the arch down, you know what I mean? Like as far as how intense they were. And that's definitely a hard conversation to have like online, since everything's all social media or whatever. We're just like, well, they're not like a Christian band anymore. And I'm so jaded to that at this point in my life that I'm like, dude, but it's a banger of a record. I don't care about like all that stuff. But
that's the thing is like, it just like we were talking about a minute ago, like people grow. I made a statement when I was 13 years old that I believe in the Lord and I'm saved, right? And I'm 38 years old now. And like, that's a whole, we could have 10 podcasts about where I'm at spiritually right now.
Let's schedule those out.
Yeah. But I'm not the person that I was when I was 13. And Dan from Gideon is not the same person he was when he was 13, right. And like, people have to accept that and respect it. And there's just people, but also bands go about it different ways. Like Plea was very intentional about how we like let that information out, and like it was I think smooth about it. And then like Gideon was just kind of like, yo, fuck you guys, like
pretty much.
I mean, I'm like really good friends with them, so I'm not shit talking them at all. But like, like even another band like 100th, I'm really good friends with those dudes, but they did the same thing. Like
they're incredible.
Like, they were like, we're a Christian band, and then they did some tours where they're like, spitting in the face of Christians kind of thing. Like, I don't know, not really. Like, it's everybody's got their own art and their own life, and they can handle that transition the way they want. But one, as an artist, you have to respect the fans that got you to where you are, and figure out how to let them know that, you're going a different direction. But then as the fan, you have to respect that artist for what they want to do and where their journey is,
Yeah, for sure. And like the biggest example of that for me is Zayo, who is basically on a totally different planet spiritually, but like their music's like some of the best stuff they put out ever lately. And like they Yeah, it's one of those situations where everybody's like so big on Zayo, like, oh, but it's a shame that they're not, Christians anymore, and yada 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 yada. And it's just, it gets exhausting, dude. Like when you've been into Christian metal as long as I have, which I'm sure you probably have too, that stuff gets so exhausting after a while. Like talking to people about it on social media or whatever the equivalent to social media was 20 years ago, which was like message boards, and stuff. And it's like, I still see it day and day. Is so-and-so band still Christian, or is yada, yada, yada Christian? And, and I've even, I've even experienced even like in doing the podcast has been like, cause Joe and I were in a Christian hardcore band, when we were younger, and we did we did like a Christian metal magazine and all that stuff when we were younger. And so when this show came out, the very, like, I don't know, man, like the 10 people that read all that stuff or whatever, or was part of that or whatever, comes back with pitchforks in hands, and they're all like, what happened to you? All this stuff. And we were always just very like, I don't know, man, it's a podcast. You don't have to listen to it. It's okay. You got freedom, but, yeah, like I totally feel for bands like that. And, I get accused a lot of times of baiting people into like that question about like, what did the Christian industry make you do or whatever. That's just like pure curiosity, and just like, I always wonder if it matches up with what I experienced in that as well. But yeah, like I've seen it, like the altar calls and the, you have to say this or you have to say that, or if you don't say something about the Lord tonight, then people are going to feel like they didn't get what they paid for. And then you're like, well, doesn't the Lord mean more than that? And, all this stuff.
Sure.
And I've always felt like it's something very, very, very personal. And it's something that I feel like, people will just throw out there just to sell units and all that, which, I don't have to tell you about that. You wrote a whole record about it, like,
For sure.
But
People might get in, and like, I can only use my example or, my journey as an example, but like, I started in that, like, on that path with the most, like, righteous heart. Like,
sure.
I was 13. I became a Christian. That became like the most important thing to me. I started listening to Christian music. Like, that was my life. That's what I got into. And then I was like, oh man, that's what I'm supposed to be doing in my life. I want to travel the world telling the people about Jesus. And then, like, from A to Z, it gets skewed. And like, I start realizing like a lot more things about myself and about Christianity and about the world. And like, then it becomes, oh man, I'm just a part of this machine, dude. Like, and I don't even really know, like, I'm not as strong in my foundation, and the shit I'm saying out of my mouth half the time, I'm not really sure I believe in it. And so I think there's probably a lot of other people in the world that have that same experience. But like, once you're like making some money and traveling and got a career based on it, you're like, it's hard to break free of that or to question it or whatever,
Sure.
And then it just becomes this monster. But then there's some people that, like, I'm not judging everybody. There's, Jeremy Camp or whoever out there's some massive dude that 100% believes every single word that comes out of his mouth. And that's sick too, because people need that.
Joe, you got anything, man? I feel like I've been talking for like an hour and you're like sitting there just like looking at me,
man.
like,
I'm having a bit of a fanboy moment. I've been trying to fight it off for an hour and a half because, dude, we're talking to Andy Atkins.
Dude, I get it. I'm a pretty big fan of myself.
I'm telling you, man.
Right?
I remember the first Plea show that we went to. It was when Corpus Christi didn't have a drummer.
Oh, geez, and Aaron's playing drums for him.
And you were consuming the front of the stage. They were the first band of the night, but here you were, spread out, just trying to get the room hyped because Corpus Christi is about to play with your drummer. And you said that several times, my drummer.
Yeah, that's funny. I barely remember. Were we playing before them?
You were you were after them.
You played after
them?
They did, yeah.
And I just remember, I'm sorry, dude, but the joke in the car on the way there was, no, dude, seriously, the band is like 100% all their merch, everything. It's about the fat guy. What are
Yeah,
you talking
dude.
about? You'll see when you get there. And then you get up there and start doing that Chris Farley style aerobic jumping. Like, no, I'm going to get the crowd hyped up. I'm going to get the crowd going. I know you were affected by the pressure of always needing to be on. But how did you get yourself in that mindset when you had to do it? Even when you didn't want to, but you know you got to go out there and you got to be the positive guy in the front of the room. How do you turn on that portion of Andy Atkins, the lead singer of A Plea for Purging, who's going to do 2 songs and then tell everybody in the room how hot it is and that everybody needs to practice good powder technique?
I can't remember any of this stuff, but man,
Isn't it crazy what people remember? Yeah.
yeah, that's so sick. Man, I don't know, like you're talking about like a Scream the Prayer show, right? Where there was probably like 500 to 1,000 kids in the room. Like it's way, way easier to turn it on at that when like you just put out a record that rips and you're playing to a room of like, let's average it out, 800 kids. And like you hit a note and the whole room goes crazy. Like it's pretty easy, whether you're having a terrible day or a great day, to walk into that experience and be like, holy crap, let's jam, dude. Like those shows, like some of those tours, like, anybody can talk crap on Scream the Prayer, but that's some of the biggest tours we ever played. And
I love
like
that tour, dude.
those shows they're so insane. Like it's kind of cheesy. Like the Scream the Prayer, just that title is kind of cheesy. And like, like all the bands that were not, I don't want to say all of them, but 80% of the bands that were on those tours now probably don't want to like admit that they were a Christian band at one point in their career. And, there's that whole thing. But like, dude, those shows were intense. Kids came ready to party, ready to just have a good time. You sold insane amount of merch. Like they were just really fun shows. And that was a cool tour because we were like, I think we were number 2 of like 10 bands or something. And like, we had a whole lot to prove, but like even playing that early in the show, like I feel like we killed it. And there were like a lot of kids that really latched on our band on that tour. Like we gained a lot of fans, I think. Man, it was sick. It was fun. I don't remember what question I'm answering, but like that was a good time, dude.
Oh, it's cool, man. And I guess
I want to talk about the shirts. This ties in to like you were talking about how like, oh, you're on the way there and you're in a car full of people and you're talking about the funny fat guys on the t-shirts. Like ties into that thing that like in the very beginning when we started shopping our band around and trying to get signed and get management, like I had people tell me, yo, your band would be more successful if you lost 60 pounds or 100 pounds. Like, like your weight is going to affect your career. And it did. And I think like our goofiness and my weight and like our image affected how successful maybe we could have been. But instead of taking that as a handicap, we just like marketed the hell out of it, Like, okay, we're fat, we're funny, this dude's fucking obese, let's put him on a shirt and let's make fun of it. And like people remembered that, and the people that cared about what we were doing really latched onto that. So it was fun. It's fun being the poster child for obesity.
I feel you. No, I mean, I ran into that too when I played in my own band. People were always like, why don't you go on more walks or something, dude? Like when it was always like, and it never affected the effect. It never affected the like intensity of their performances or anything like that, but like for some reason people always felt like, for some stupid reason, people always felt the need to mention it in a way that like, and so I applaud you in that you're like, dude, bring it on. Like, this is like, I'm going to embrace it and make it, a strength. It's a bug, it's a feature, not a bug,
Yeah.
And
I mean, I think it's crazy that like, if you look at the world of music and metal, like we're like one of the only bands that got as far as we got with like a really fucking fat dude as a lead singer, you know, like that's kind of cool, man.
So that's a Meatloaf. Yeah, you know?
Yeah, right.
And you know what, while we're talking about that, so like just in the past few months, maybe it was weeks, it feels like months, I don't know. This lockdown's weird. But like you guys put out a track called Fat Pride, which my understanding is not a new song, but an older song. What was your, you know, because we were kind of talking a little bit earlier off mic about how, you know, you're posting stuff and people that are into Plea are always like jumping on it. You guys released this song called Fat Pride, and immediately everybody jumps to the conclusion that, oh, Plea must be getting back together. Like, what? How did you handle that? Because I'm sure you got flooded with messages and comments and stuff, people thinking that the band's going to do something. And my understanding is that it's not, but I don't know. I just, I don't know if anybody's ever asked you about it. So I'm asking you about it.
Right. I mean, like, that song's not new. When we put out the Life and Death, we put out a 7-inch with Heart of a Child on it.
Okay.
And the B side to that Heart of a Child 7-inch was the Fat Pride song.
Yeah.
And it was never released digitally. So, I mean, the simple story is Face Down, like Shannon, our publicist, emailed us one day and said, hey, how would you guys feel about putting Fat Pride on the internet just because it was never on there? Like, let's put it up on Spotify and Apple Music and all that stuff just so people have it. And we were like, absolutely. We didn't even realize it wasn't. So like but then like there's a backstory to the fact that like the way that Spotify and Apple Music and all this stuff works is for some reason you have to have a Facebook page. I don't know if it's all tied together. I don't understand it. But we didn't have a Facebook page anymore because Facebook took down our page for some reason.
Right.
And we had to have a new one. So we got a new Facebook page, and then when we did that, we also got a Twitter and an Instagram. Just cause I think Blake was just really like bored one day and just opened up all that stuff since he was already doing the Facebook thing.
Sure.
And then it just got crazy for like about a week, and people were like, "Oh my gosh, Plea is coming back! They're releasing new music." And the reality was, we just like wanted to put up this song, and put it online. Yeah. With all that being said, like, when we broke up, we like made it a huge point that we would never, ever play another show ever again. Like, we are very adamant about like, we're breaking up and we're not doing this, and we're not going to be that reunion band that everybody sees, come play shows every 2 years. And then we ended up playing a reunion show. We played Face Down Fest like in 2017.
I was going to say, you did do that. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And like, I mean, and we were actually asked to do it, and we said no. Like when Jason said, hey, do you guys want to play Face Down Fest? It's the 20-year reunion of Face Down being a record label. We said no. And then Aaron moved to California and started hanging out with Jason and pretty much talked him into it. And then Aaron called all of us and said, hey, let's do it. So we did it. And it's an even way longer story. Like, we get out there, we rent a practice space, we rehearse for like a week. John's wife is pregnant in Tennessee. She can't come. She goes into labor 2 months early. John flies home the day before we play Face Down Fest and doesn't even play the show with us. Blake and I have to go into Jason's house at Face Down, go to Guitar Center, buy all the gear that we would need to track all the bass parts and make them so we could play with like a backing track to a bass player. And we played that Face Down Fest without John, long story short. So that was kind of a bummer. Fast forward to now. We've all decided that like it doesn't have to be so cut and dry, and it doesn't have to be so black and white. And like, we all have careers and we're alive and living our lives and stuff. And if it were ever to make sense for us to play a show, maybe we would play a show. But the reality of that is like it making sense. And I'm not trying to be like grab for money. but like it has to make sense financially for Aaron, who lives in California, Tyler, who lives in Indiana, John, who lives in Knoxville, and me and Blake, who live in Nashville, to all be in the same place for a week to rehearse and then go play a show somewhere. That's kind of an expensive price tag to make that happen. So
for sure.
I don't really think we're worth too much money that people would want to pay for that to happen. But if they did, it's not out of the question at this point. But we don't have a ton of offers sitting at the door. You know what I'm saying?
Joe, how much money do we have in the Patreon right now?
$60 last I heard.
Hang on.
You want? Oh, damn. Okay. All right. Fine. All right. It's fine. Well, you know what? In 3 years, we're gonna. Yeah, but that's the ultimate goal, right? Well, that's the thing that bummed me out. Like with Furnace Fest, I'm like getting really terrified that Furnace Fest ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, dude.
That was
you guys plan on going?
Yeah, dude. It was like a dream come true, dude. I've been like emailing Chad Johnson like every day, being like, dude, the premier podcast that should be at Furnace Fest is this one, and all that. But like, I'm a little terrified at this point that like, I mean, some bands are talking about like, dude, we're probably not going to tour until 2021,
right.
And they had gotten all these bands together again. I mean, there really aren't a whole lot of places where you're going to get to see, Converge, Knocked Loose, Dillinger Escape Plan, Zayo, Living Sacrifice, Beloved, like that kind of lineup is just
it's ridiculous. Legendary. It's insane. Like the price tag is heavy, but like I haven't bought a ticket, but I do plan on going before it's all said and done. Like, I mean, those are all the bands I was listening to when I was like 16 years old, like
same.
It's insane. I think it'd be like going back in time, to another realm. So I hope it does happen, like working on the inside in the industry. I realized that like there's a good chance that September is still a little shaky in the events world, but I hope it does happen. I'd love to go. We were in talks with Chad about playing that, but it just didn't work.
Yeah, that's a bummer. But I mean, it's only kind of a bummer if you look at everything else that they have going on. Like, because I was hoping, like, I had in my mind that, like, dude, he's going to start doing this every year. And it's going to be like, every year it's going to be bands that you'd never even imagine that you'd ever get to see live, ever again.
Yeah.
And, like, because the Beloved one, that was a big one. Like, for me and, some of the other bands just, like, even bands like Showbread that were there and disappeared. Getting together and playing the album that everybody liked in its entirety, all that stuff was just incredible. And yeah, it was the big thing I was looking forward to this year. And now it's like, yeah, it's probably not going to happen. They haven't announced it, but if it does happen, man, I definitely will owe you a beer there if you come.
Sick.
Yeah, dude. You gotta
turn it down.
You got to remind me though, because we'd be all like, "Hey, dude, you said something about a beer," and I was like, "Oh yeah, well, I spent like a whole bunch of money to get here."
Yeah, dude. I remember like, "Yo, dude, you said something about like 3 beers. You remember that?"
Yeah, and then Joe's gonna be all like, "Yeah, I got the tape. He definitely said 3."
Yeah, dude.
That's awesome. Well, to kind of end it off, because we've taken up your whole evening, and I apologize for that, but one of the things that ended off is, so the band ends, we're kind of ending where we started. The band ends, you guys famously did the Quit Your Band, Get a Job tour and all of that. And, and a lot of people that probably followed you more closely on social media than I did probably already know the answer to this, but how is Andy Atkins in 2020 and what plans do you have for the future? Like, what are you looking forward to? What are you stoked about, minus the, obviously the virus stuff?
Dude, it's been a crazy journey since I left the band. Like, I knew that it was a glass ceiling and that it was going to end and that there was only so far metalcore was going to take me, but I didn't make any plans outside of that because I was just really living life for the moment and trying to soak in all the experience. So when it all ended, like, I just fell right into the world trying to figure it out, hit the ground running. I've worked like a ton of different crappy jobs, some good, some bad.
Yeah.
And like finally landed a job that's somewhat a career, I guess, in what I'm doing now. But this whole like coronavirus thing where it's forced me to spend a lot of time at home has really got me rethinking like what's important to me. And I mean, we have to pay our bills. You have to go and you got to go to work and do what you got to do to keep the lights on, right? But like, I don't have to be 100% career minded all the time and think about my job all the time. I should start thinking about like the things that bring me joy, you know? And so currently I'm like really trying to focus on myself and what brings me happiness and joy. And those things are like the obvious is hanging out with Rachel, my fiance, and riding and working on motorcycles is a pretty big passion of mine. But like, you know, I touched on it a little bit in the beginning of this, but like, I'm trying to like put this party on forever vibe out into the world where like, I want to focus on, the things that make me feel good and youthful and positive, as opposed to the impending doom of, financial debt and death, you know, all the things that we really think about as adults. I'm trying to remember what it was like to be 13 years old and hear Poking At You for the first time, you know, by MXPX or something, and just be a punk and have a good time and have fun. So I'm currently working on like an idea of putting out a bunch of content for YouTube videos and podcasts and, you know, being in contact with the world again outside of my little bubble. It's exciting. I got a t-shirt for sale online that's got my face on it again because people seem to like those. Yeah, I'm really into choring. That's the whole thing where like I bought a house last year for the first time in my life, and like there's a whole lot of chores that are involved in owning a home. And instead of like being alone in my chores, I've been trying to post them all online so there will be like a solidarity aspect of choring. And it's taken off. People are like posting the hashtag choring and like posting videos and pictures of them like doing chores. And it's funny, but it's also cool because it's like encouraging other people to not be slobs and to take care of their lives and to get their shit in order. I like it. That's what I got going on.
Yeah. I need to get better on that. I work
get
all
your
the time.
Shit together, dude.
I'm trying to. But dude, that's awesome. That's great. And you know, then one of the things that I loved about all of that, the choring and all that stuff or whatever, it's like, dude, we've had such a rough year in 2020 up to this point, and the world needs more Andy Atkins. You know what I mean? Like we need that. That's something that I had when I was a kid. That's something I had when I was not so much a kid anymore, and that's something that I've now got as an adult, and it makes me happy. You know?
That's sick. I mean, like, I'm pretty vain too. If I just want to be like completely honest with everybody, like I like love hearing myself talk, and I think I'm like funny and really witty and got really great things to say. And like for some reason being like a really big fat dude, like it's like funny and okay to say those things. If I was like a super attractive, fit, like successful dude, and I was like, dude, I'm hilarious and I'm funny and the world needs me, people would think that's like, who is this dude? He's asinine. But like for some reason it's funny and endearing when like I say it. So, you know, I just got to keep putting it out there. People love me. If you don't know me and you're listening to me this far in this interview, you're going to love me. So follow me on all the socials because I'm going to change your life.